By the beginning of the 19th century, steam engines had existed for decades, providing power for machinery in all sorts of heavy industries. For example, winding gear in the mines. But these engines were static. Okay, they were massive, but they didn't go anywhere. To get from A to B, you still had to go by horse, canal barge, or sailing boat. And journey times haven't changed much since the Dark Ages. But a Cornishman called Richard Trevithick was about to change all that.
Trevithick was asked by the owner of a Welsh ironworks to build a machine to haul iron from his foundry in Penydarren to the Merthyr-Cardiff Canal 9 miles away. The roads were terrible, so Trevithick proposed driving the steam-powered machine on rails.
And this was it, the barking, bonking mad Penydarren, named after the ironworks itself. The secret's here, the boiler. In a standard steam engine, the boiler worked like a kettle. It was just a big container of water with fire underneath, producing steam at low pressure. Now this system is very different.
Unlike the kettle, the steam is at high pressure, very high pressure, and packs a lot of power.
The heat from that fire passes down a pipe. Heat from the pipe heats the water, makes the water boil, steam is produced. That steam passes into the cylinder here, which drives a piston. That piston, via this connecting rod and this series of cogs, drives the wheels.
High-pressure steam let a small engine pack enough punch to drive itself along. That was the big breakthrough that got steam engines mobile.
But here was the final stroke of genius. Once the steam had done its work, Trevithick channeled the exhausted steam out of the cylinder along this pipe here and up out of the chimney, drawing more air into the fire, which increased the temperature.
Giving even more power.
Oh, it's utterly, utterly mad. It's all engine and I love it. Anthony, open the regulator and let's go!
It ran for the first time 200 years ago, in February 1804.
Feel the G-force! It reached about 3 miles an hour generally, and that is faster than walking pace, believe me. This huge, great flywheel on this side here helps balance out the stresses to make the ride a lot smoother.
This is actually a replica, as the mad 3-mile-an-hour original only ran a few times. It weighed a staggering 7 tons and broke the cast iron rails it ran along. But it was a start. It was George Stephenson and his son Robert who got some serious speed out of a steam engine. George set up the world's first locomotive factory in Newcastle, and in 1829 Robert built their most famous steam locomotive.
I give you the rocket. And already you can see some of the changes from Trevithick's crazy Penydarren.
On the outside, there are 2 huge pistons inclined at an angle of 35 degrees, giving more drive to the wheels. But it's inside the boiler that rocket's so different from its predecessor.
Now on Trevithick's Penydarren, there was a single large pipe running from the firebox through the boiler to the chimney, whereas on Rocket there are lots of smaller pipes transferring heat to the water in the boiler. These tubes heat the water in the boiler, creating the steam under pressure that goes up into the dome and then down that central pipe, driving the pistons here in the cylinders. So all this extra heat and heat transfer and pressure and... oh, hello.
All this extra heat transfer increases the boiler's ability to create steam.
And more steam pressure to the cylinders meant more power.
A loco's power is measured in how many pounds of weight it can theoretically pull. Rocket was rated at a mighty 1,400 pounds. Power meant speed.
Roll up, get your tickets for the Rainhill Trials, the world's greatest spectacle of thunderous smoke-belching machines competing over a 35-mile track. The winner, to receive the princely sum of £500. 10 locomotives entered, only 5 turned up, and by the third day, Rocket was the only loco left in the competition.
Rocket, with its multi-tubular boiler and vertical steam venting, left the others for dead. On one run, it reached the unheard-of speed of 29 miles an hour, a speed some physicians had postulated would kill you.
In 1830, the Stephensons went one step further with the introduction of their Planet-type locomotives.
Robert Stephenson's Planets were capable of the deadly speed of 44 miles an hour.
The big change was that the frame was now separate, whereas earlier locomotives had used the boiler as the frame. And in the quest for more power, the cylinders were now horizontal. And in this case, they're actually inside the frame. By putting these cylinders inside the frame, they were protected from the onrushing cold air, which up until then had made the steam condense, causing a loss of power. It's quite an art going at a steady speed, of course. You need very careful control on the regulator.
The Stephensons had perfected the basic design for getting power and speed out of a steam loco. A basic layout all locos would use from then on. The railways were first built with freight traffic in mind. But within a few years, it became clear there was another massive market, that of passenger transport. Passengers who wanted to get from A to B quicker than they could by horse. Indeed, from A to B as fast as was humanly possible.
Speed had become a major part of the locomotive game, and the first 100 mph vehicle ever on the planet was just around the corner.
Steam trains had revolutionized travel, reducing journey times from days to hours. But still, the great railway engineers raced to make their engines go even faster.
When Trevithick built the first steam locomotive, he put it on a track 4 feet 4 inches wide, the standard gauge used for pony-drawn rail wagons in the mines. Stephenson added another 4.5 inches to improve stability going round corners. 4 feet 8.5 inches. But in the 1840s, someone had bigger ideas. Someone rather famous for having bigger ideas, most of them very good bigger ideas. Isambard Kingdom Brunel. Look at that, 7 feet apart. Brunel reckoned that a wider track would make for a more stable train. But a wider track also meant you could have a bigger engine. And a bigger engine meant a bigger boiler. And what do bigger boilers mean? More power.
The Iron Duke here, designed for Brunel's Great Western Railway, weighs in at 35 tons and did 60 miles an hour. Everyone agreed that Brunel's wide gauge was faster and in every way superior.
So, why aren't we running trains on a 7-foot gauge today? Well, by the mid-19th century, so much track had been laid at 4 foot 8.5 that the inferior narrower gauge was chosen as standard. It quite literally overwhelmed the market.
So instead of rail size, the race for speed could only be about engines. Massive engines. And a young engineer, Thomas Crampton, had a very speedy design.
Well, it may be small, but it is in fact an exact replica of the real thing. This is a Crampton engine. It's still got a massive boiler, still got massive driving wheels, but the centre of gravity is lower than on any previous locomotive. It's really a kind of railway dragster. Oh, hello. Oh, hello. The Cramptons were real speed merchants of their day. They could achieve speeds up to 90 miles an hour, but they were never very popular in Britain. This is mainly because the driver standing here was positioned right over the rigid driving axle. Made life pretty uncomfortable for him. But it didn't worry the French. Sur le continent, the Cramptons really took off. Prenons le Crampton was the cry from the platforms.
90 miles an hour for the Crampton, an ungodly speed to travel at. And it would be decades before another engine went significantly faster.
And this is it. In May 1904, this great Western locomotive, City of Truro, number 3717, was reputedly clocked at a speed of 102.3 miles an hour. That's the first time any form of transport had travelled at over 100.
100 miles an hour, an incredible speed. And what's amazing is that this engine hadn't changed much from Stephenson's original design 50 years earlier. So what made this loco so special? It all boils down to the builder, George Churchward. In an age of intense rivalry, attention to detail was the key to keeping ahead of the competition. And Churchward was obsessed with detail.
Churchward was a man who liked to get his hands dirty. He was the engineer's engineer. His genius was to take the best ideas from all around the world and cunningly adapt them for use on his own engines, with great attention to detail. Look at these shoulders sticking out from behind the boiler. They're there because this locomotive, City of Truro, has got a Bel-Paire firebox.
Invented by the Belgians.
It's this shape. Wider at the top, which gives more room for the steam, which ultimately gives more power.
It generated a pulling power of 18,000 pounds, 13 times that of Stephenson's rocket, with the boiler operating at a staggering 225 pounds per square inch. But even with such a high-tech machine, getting maximum speed out of the engine still came down to the skill of the fireman and the driver.
On the footplate here, the fireman and the driver learn to read the messages that the engine is sending them. For example, if you look out the front window and you see that the steam from the chimney is too white, that means more coal is needed on the fire. Because when coal's burning properly at its most efficient, then the steam should be actually darker coming out of the chimney. The idea is to try and get all the coal spread evenly throughout the firebox. So you should really start by throwing the coal as far forward as you can and then bringing it back towards you. But the real trick, the real skill is to get the coal into the corners down there and down there. That's what I'm going to try and do now. Of course, putting it in the corners means you've got to linger a bit longer with your hand near the firebox. Quite hot.
Churchward's attention to detail got his trains to go faster and faster. He was a man obsessed who lived for engineering, but in the end his obsession carried a terrible price.
Churchward loved being on the shop floor, but he just didn't know when to hang up the spanners and walk away. After he'd retired, he would often come back and potter around the engine sheds. And on the morning of the 19th of December 1933, he was run over by a locomotive and died. But Churchward was around long enough to witness the unveiling of this masterpiece, this god of the transport world, this words really are not good enough to say how wonderful this machine is. It was built in 1932 by the London North Eastern Railway chief engineer, Nigel Gresley. These engines would make their designers as famous as film stars.
The Union of South Africa is an A4 class Pacific loco which evolved from the legendary Flying Scotsman, an A3 class. Gresley's A4s are the most admired locos ever built because of their revolutionary shape and their speed.
One of the most distinctive features about this awesome machine is the streamlining. And of course, as far as engineers are concerned, the streamlining isn't that good because they can't get at things. But the streamlining did work. This engine can do over 110 miles an hour. Right, well, here we are. A dream come true. Hi, Derek. You all right?
Yes, fine, thank you.
Oh, what are you, assistant driver?
I'm a fireman.
Fireman. Right. Bit of youth required for the energetic job of filling up the old firebox. It's a living thing. But the glow of the firebox there, flames licking out of the firebox, all the gauges, steam coming in through the roof. It's thoroughly exciting, and words can't really express just how exciting it is.
Nigel Gresley built the A4 with speed in mind. It could do the run from London to Edinburgh in 6.5 hours. The streamlined shape made a difference, but it was only half the story. The other key to speed lay deep in the heart of the loco. Here, Gresley had smoothed all the kinks and bends out of the steam pipes so the steam could flow more easily and retain more power. Coupled with a high-speed kill-chap exhaust system, it generated a massive 36,000 pounds of power. Twice that of Churchwood's city of Truro.
In a tunnel, in a steam locomotive, on the footway. Spectacular.
With a speed of over 110 miles an hour, Gresley's A4s competed throughout the 1930s to be the fastest trains in the world. The main opposition was the LMS rail company, the London, Midland and Scottish, operating the West Coast route to Scotland. Pride of the LMS fleet were the Coronation-class engines designed by William Stanier. Originally streamlined too, they had the biggest boilers of any trains in Britain, generating a staggering 40,000 pounds of power. 10% more than Gresley's A4.
On June the 29th, 1937, a Coronation took the world speed record, doing 114 miles an hour
Down Madeley Bank.
It was going so fast that all the crockery in the dining car smashed as the engine struggled to stop at Crewe Station.
But within a year, a Gresley A4 was to take the record back. This Gresley A4, Mallard. Its superior overall design made all the difference, despite its smaller engine. On the 3rd of July, 1938, Mallard set off ostensibly to test her brakes. Only when the brake testers were on board were they told that they will be trying for the speed record. She smashed it, doing 126 miles an hour. And unbelievably, they're going to let me drive this beast. It's a Gresley A4, just like Mallard. It's like having your first driving lesson in a Ferrari.
Right.
There we go.
Ah!
Shut.
Shut now.
Yeah, it's right down. Right down hard. That's
So we've, just by doing that, we've let enough steam into the cylinders
it. Get the train moving.
to get the train moving.
Turn this handle.
Yeah.
Clockwise.
There.
Yeah, a bit more now. Bottom 25. That's fine. Don't move it down. That's it. That's fine. Very good. Done this before, haven't you?
That's the brake whenever we need it, regulator, and this is in effect the gearbox. We're going to pass an SW sign now, which means sound the whistle. There's the sign, here's the whistle.
When this A4 was built, it took you the best part of 15 years to qualify as a driver, progressing through engine cleaner, apprentice fireman, then apprentice driver, before finally getting your license.
SW, sound the whistle, a lot to think about.
For the record-breaking run of 1938, a specialist driver was brought in, Ted Duddington. He had a reputation for being able to drive engines hard, and he did. In the process of reaching 126 miles an hour, the train broke, with the big end overheating. But it was worth it. Gresley's Loco now had the record.
Hard work! Imagine doing this from London to Edinburgh.
And imagine what it must have been like during that record-breaking run of 1938, the firemen shoveling like mad to maintain the perfect pressure in the boiler. That record of 126 miles an hour has never been beaten. The Gresley A4 is the fastest steam loco ever built.
Well, this really is a dream come true for me. I mean, I'm on the footplate of an A4 Pacific. Absolutely spectacular. I mean, this machine is just shrouded with greatness. I mean, it's so shrouded with greatness, I'm surprised we can even see where we're going. It's a true god amongst mechanical horses. It's just breathtaking.